Can we get a big round of applause for Tastimos, ladies and gentlemen?
Thank you, Andrew. That was a pretty big wrap. So I better give you guys what these guys have promised I'd deliver. I just wanted to talk to you guys broadly about superannuation and borrowing through your superannuation fund and how it works, and try to keep it as simple as I possibly can. We're a bunch of accountants. We're located in Sydney. Whilst we do accounting, we do other stuff as well. And we try to, like I said, keep things simple. So the test of that is going to be my presentation. Before we talk about borrowing through your superannuation fund to buy a property, the question is, should you set up a self-managed super fund? Okay? And we will sit there and say to clients, look, unless you got about $400,000 to $500,000 in super between you and your partner, it's probably not worth doing so. Okay? Until you get to that level, I wouldn't bother setting up a self-managed super fund because of the costs, because of the time that it takes to administer all those sorts of things. If you can, and what I've got to also mention about a self-managed super fund, you can have up to 4 people in that superannuation fund, okay? So you might want to pull it with your in-laws or, I mean, I've got my self-managed super fund and I have that pulled with my sister and my brother-in-law, so there's 4 of us in that. And that allows us to obviously access, and we do have property through there, better properties and have greater deposits to do what we want to do. So the advantages are having a self-managed super fund. You have control and flexibility over what you want to do in your super fund. Now, if you've got a significant amount of money in your super fund, it can be cheaper to actually have it and manage it yourself. Usually, if you've got it in a retail fund, those retail investment houses like AMP and Colonial First State and Credit Suisse, if they're going to be around soon, will usually charge about 1% of funds under management. The general cost of a superannuation fund, there's guys out there that'll do it for $1,000 and manage the administration side of it for about $1,000 a year. If you want a bit more advice and things like that, it'll probably cost you from about $2,500 upwards. And it usually sort of caps out at, the $10,000 mark for those that have got millions of dollars in superannuation. As I mentioned before, greater access to investment options, and it's also a really good tool for estate planning, which I won't go into, but I haven't got much time to talk. The disadvantages are it's time consuming. You've got to manage it. You've got to take control of receiving all the investment information, collating it, giving it to your accountant. They've got to get it audited, so there's a bit of compliance involved. As a trustee, every member of the superannuation fund needs to be a trustee of that superannuation fund. So they're responsible for the activities, the investments, everything to do with the superannuation fund. Obviously, if you want to set up your own superannuation fund and there's a large pool of money, you're going to have to sort of seek investment advice from a financial planner of some sort, and they usually charge a bit of money for that. There might be legal advice and other tax advice that you might need to do that and to manage that properly. Borrowing through a self-managed super fund. The reason why you would borrow borrow through a self-managed super fund is to leverage, obviously. And over a period of time, it's all about building up the value of what you have in your superannuation fund so you can retire comfortably. And borrowing allows you to do that. It allows you to leverage up. Instead of buying a $400,000 asset, you can now go and buy $1 million asset and pay that back over a period of time. You're not limited to just borrowing for, say, a residential property, a unit. You can buy farmland, you can buy land, you can land bank a development site. You cannot develop through a superannuation fund, but it allows you to do that sort of stuff. You can buy your factory, your office suite through it, and we'll talk about that in a second. The lender who lends you the money doesn't have to be a financial institution. There are rules around what they must charge, and it's got to be commercial. And obviously, whatever money you contribute into the superannuation fund, part of your SGC or the contributions that you make to your super fund, can go towards paying off that loan and that property. To buy a property, you must satisfy some rules when buying a property through a self-managed super fund. The sole purpose test must be met, and that sole purpose test not only revolves around and relates to a property, but every investment that you undertake through a self-managed super fund, the sole purpose of it must be for your retirement. Okay? You can't buy a property from a related party, so you can't buy a property from your brother or your sister or a family member. You can't have a family member live in that property, and it can't be rented to a family member. I have a lot of clients that say to me, "Oh, can I buy a holiday house through my self-managed super fund?" The answer is yes, you can, but you can't go using it, nor can your family members go using it. The exception to that rule is commercial properties, office suites, industrial suites, things like that. You can lease it. So you run your business and you want to buy an office suite for it, you can do that. You can borrow through your super fund to do that. And if, for example, I've done a lot of restructuring with clients where they personally own, I've got one client at the moment, she runs a business in Stanmore, she owns a property in her own name. I'm restructuring that. It's a commercial property so that she can buy it through her super fund. But what we need to do in circumstances like that is obviously get it done, get a commercial valuation done, and always do things at market rates. Okay? So we need to be able to prove to the tax office, if they come looking, that, you know what, we're doing this at an arm's length. How does this work? I'll just talk you through it very quickly. So what we have, if we need to set up a self-managed super fund, this is the components that we sort of set up. Okay? We want to go to the bank and we've identified a property. What we do is go to a financial institution and we say we want to borrow X amount of money, and that financial institution gives it to us. Okay? We acquire the property, but we must do so under a separate trustee or a custodian, and there must be a bare trust between. These are all legal things that, again, going back to a slide that I had a few before, to set this up, you really need to sort of get some advice and make sure it's done properly, because if you don't buy the property in the right name, it's going to take a lot to unwind it, and it's going to be quite costly to do it properly. Okay? So you must seek advice in doing this. And obviously, when you're talking about trustees, custodians, bare trusts, this costs money to set up. Okay? Something like this wouldn't cost you less than about $4,000 or $5,000 to do. Okay? So you really need to think about it. You need to make sure that this is right for you. Can I get the next slide, please? So as I said, higher costs. One thing I will say about these loans too, at the moment mortgage rates for a residential property sit probably between, 5.5%. Jonathan can talk to us about that. These loans, you can't go into ANZ, Commonwealth Bank and get these loans. They don't really want, the majors don't really want to do these sorts of loans. There's a few players out there, and they're charging about 7 to 7.5%. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan. Oh, there you go, 5.99.
Who was that?
Latrobe. Yeah. So you've got to be careful too in doing your numbers and your metrics, that you take into consideration the fact that some of these loans can be more costly. Obviously, you need to make sure that the rent, your contributions into the superannuation fund are able to pay off the repayments and make it all work. In the event of someone's death or disability, what happens? Have you got a provision? Have you got life insurance for people in the superannuation fund? These are all things that you need to talk to your advisor about to make sure that this can work. And obviously, one major thing that you cannot do, you can't buy a rundown property, borrow against it, and then go and fix it up. You can't even so much as renovate a kitchen or a bathroom if you've borrowed against a property. You can't do substantial renovations to it. Once you've paid it off, you can. But until then, you're not allowed to touch it. Like I said, disclaimer, go and see your financial advisor. Happy to chat to you guys on an individual basis. There's a lot to this, so it's really important that you get it right. And don't stuff it up at the outset. But it is a very, it's a really great structure to build some wealth. And yeah, I don't know if we want to do questions now or leave it till later. Do you want to do any questions now?
Awesome, we got time for a couple of questions, definitely, yeah. First of all, can I just go a big round of applause for Tass? That was a great presentation. As someone who's navigated that SMSF landscape for a long time, because a lot of people didn't even know about it. That's the funny part, and this is what it's all about being here tonight, so well done on that. We've got a question from the lady here. Well, I'll pass you the microphone, man, bear with me 1 second. We'll get that from the camera as well. Feel free to stand up if you want.
Really interesting, thank you. Hi, people. I was just wondering, you said it's not really worth doing unless you got between you 400 to 500,000. But what if you're an individual? What if you're single? Do you think that's still
It depends on how much you have. You can do it as an individual, absolutely. Absolutely, you can do it as an individual. It really depends on how much you have in your current superannuation fund as to whether or not you think about a strategy like this. In addition to that, you need to think about, obviously, a loan like that or undertaking an investment like that is probably got a 10-year horizon by the time you pay it back. So you've got to think about, obviously, what your retirement plans are, your age, and work out whether or not that's the right strategy for you. Because if you're likely to retire in 5 years' time and you do one of these strategies, invariably what's going to have to happen is you're going to have to sell a property to draw down a pension on your super fund.
Yeah, and so that's where the strategy.
So you've really got to look at what your personal circumstances are and what your objectives are.
Yeah, because I think if you're selling, and you're exempt from capital gains tax, you can put 300,000 towards it.
Your principal place of residence, absolutely. You've got to satisfy certain conditions, but you're right.
Yeah.
And that's a way of bolstering your superannuation fund. It's the empty nesters concession that they've got, yes.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So if you're kind of thinking, like to help family members out and you're wanting to go build towards that, and you still do it as a single, but basically the amounts remain the same because the other concepts are the same.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
Right. Thanks very much. Let's get a big round of applause for that question. Nice, great question. Another question? Yep, over here, one moment.
Can I just ask you, if I'm looking at buying a storage facility for from a self-managed super, and I've got the super money already for it because it's not a large amount, can my self-managed super fund lease that out to my business?
Yes, you can.
In a commercial?
Absolutely. It's got to be done. You're going to have to prove. You can't just pay $100 into the super fund. It's got to be commercial, and equally, it can't be excessive either. Okay? You can't. If it's worth $500 a week, you've got to pay $500 a week.
Good news.
Actually, ironically, what the misconception that a lot of people have, and Taz, I'm sure you can shed some light on this, it actually was the reason why originally it was created for. Like, the self-managed super fund scheme was originally created for people that own their own business, that want to lease a investment that they purchase back to themselves. It was actually the original mandate of the SMSF legislation. But a lot of people, obviously it's been misconstrued over the years and been abused, and you talked about the holiday houses. I'm from Melbourne, right? So originally I live in Rosebank now, but there's so many Italians. I've got houses in Sorrento,
Dramana
and they got in so much trouble for it because, they went and bought themselves these holiday houses and their self-managed super fund. They went, oh, perfect. I can go take $2 million from my super fund and go buy waterfront property in Rosebud and use it whenever I like. You get in a lot of trouble.
You can't do that.
You can't do that. And so it was just funny before you were saying, people would ask you,
They do.
Can I buy a holiday house? Of course you can. You're just not allowed to use it, that's all. Right, we've got question 1 and question 2, and then we'll go on.
Hi, Taz.
Hi.
Would you be able to explain the empty nester rule that the state is?
Okay, okay, if you sell a property, if you've got a residential property that you live in and you want to downsize, you've got to, I think it's the ages, if you're over the age of 60 and you're selling a property and downsizing into something smaller, you can put up to $300,000 into superannuation. Sorry? Out of the sale.
Is that a one-off?
It's a one-off.
Lifetime thing,
Yeah.
so it's a bring forward. Okay.
No, it's not. It's got nothing to do with the bring forward.
Okay.
It's over and above.
Over and above forward. So you can bring forward 300,000.
No, you can put through. It's 500, is it? No, it's gone up to 500. There you go.
Okay. So if you've already done one, you can still do the other.
Yes, you can put your 100,000. So there's two different types of contributions you can make into a superannuation fund. Those that you can claim a tax deduction for, and those that you can't. And there's caps on those. The ones that you claim a tax deduction for, you can put up to 27,500 in. And the ones that you don't claim a tax deduction for, you can put in 110,000 a year. And what you're talking about is, well, I want to put in 330,000, and that's the bring forward. So that means that you can do 330,000. You're not putting anything else until that 3-year period finishes.
So once the 3-year period.
But if you sell your house within that period of time, you can put that in as well.
Thank you.
I think that's what you're asking. Yeah.
Question, big round of applause for that, ladies and gentlemen. Last question at the back.
My first one is, can you sell the investment property prior to your retirement?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then the second one, can you use the equity out of the first investment to buy a second investment property under yourself?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
No.
But if you had enough super to buy 2 properties,
If you had enough cash to
Yes.
put deposits on too, you can do that. What you've got to be careful in those circumstances is some of the financial institutions actually want you to make sure you've got some cash left aside for contingencies in case you can't make the repayments, in case tenants aren't there, all that sort of stuff. So you might have $1 million in your superannuation fund and think, I'm going to put 500 on one and 500 on another. You've got to pay the stamp duty, the legals. And like I said, some of these guys want you to have a bit of a buffer in your super fund to be able to make contingencies if and when they do arise. Okay? Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we give a big round of applause for Taz? You're going to stick around here after the show?
Sure.
Wonderful, fantastic.